Psi Network of Santa Barbara presents Dr. Janet Mitchell speaking on out-of-body experiences at the Louise Lowry Davis Center in Santa Barbara on August 15th, 1984. Dr. Mitchell is introduced by George Harris of the Psi Network.
Glad to see such a good turnout tonight. Our speaker tonight is going to be fascinating, I think. She comes from West Virginia originally, has a degree in psychology, and then worked with someone who many of us know, Gertrude Schmeidler, at City University of New York in parapsychology. She worked with Ingo Swann, who many of us have heard about, I'm sure, and has been interested in the area for many years. Presently she's kind of tending to relocate west, I think. Maybe she'll comment on that when she's talking. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Janet Mitchell. Dr. Janet Mitchell.
Hello. I'm very happy to be here out west. I'm trying to relocate. I'm staying over in northern Arizona right now, and I'm trying to get away from New York City at this point. I have been working with out-of-body experiences and in the general field of ESP for 15 years. And I started out at the American Society for Psychic Research in New York, and that was in 1967 when I started. And then in 71 is when I met Ingo Swann and started working on out-of-body experiences. That was, when I started the work, I was ready to look at telepathy and clairvoyance, but out-of-body experience was just a little too far out for me. So I said, I'll take physiological measurements of someone who says they're out of their body, but that was about as far as I would go in the beginning. I have written this book about my 10 years research with out-of-body, and I read and I talked to people. I tried to do it myself. I've never been as successful as I would like to be. Of course, I want practical purposes for my abilities, and I have some of these books here tonight, which I'll sell at a writer's discount for $10, and I'll be happy to sign it later if you'd like for me to. It's a little different being out here on the West Coast. I generally talk at universities on the East Coast there, and out here people want to know about my experiences more than they do there. They're content to hear about what went on in the laboratory. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about the laboratory and a little bit about where my mind is going in terms of the future of looking at these kinds of abilities. And I stress to you that I call these human abilities and human experiences. They don't have to be strange or bizarre or anything. They happen. They happen across cultures throughout history, and there's no reason to get funny about it in any way. It's a human ability, I think, and it operates on a continuum, so that some people might only have an out-of-body experience in a dream and call it a dream, because while they may be able to have the experience, they may not be able to realize what's happening to them. Out-of-body experiences seem to be important human experiences which extend our abilities of movement and perception. If we could develop individually and create through the media an image of ourselves as non-physical beings who possess bodies in this dimension, then maybe a lot of social problems would begin to dissolve. You have bigotry of all kinds, but it generally is about somebody's body, like nationalism, what country do they come from, their body, ageism, how old is their body, sexism? Is it a male or female body? Racism, what color is their body? So the powers that be in this society profit from this divide and conquer self-image that we live under at this present time. And the self-image that we're given, that we're a body, is to keep us separated, I think. But we think, for instance, that we know how we operate as a body. However, you can ask me to raise my hand or move my finger, and I can do it every time, but I don't have a clue how I do that. This could be a psychokinetic effect that I learned over years and years and years of trial and error. Moving your body could be a psychokinetic effect because it's the decision that creates the movement. Sometimes I think in the parapsychologist, they're trying to minimize the phenomenon to statistical significance. And my feeling is that the phenomenon is probably so big and so present that we can't see it, rather than being so small that we can't pull it out. As an example, moving our body could well be that kind of an effect, which we just take for granted as well. That's natural. But I believe that these abilities, extrasensory perception and out-of-body experience, are abilities. And they're natural abilities. But we have to learn how to cultivate our experience in the way that we want to. I mean, if you want to be a pianist, you've got to practice every day. And if you want to extend your abilities to this kind of a experience of being out of your body, then that takes dedication as much as any other ability that you want to get together and use. But I'm pretty hot on this idea about the self-image that's projected to us over the media. And I really see that if we can somehow turn that self-image around, that we're beings who possess bodies, that we can transcend a lot of these social problems just in that one fell swoop, if we can just get a more correct self-identification of who and what we are. I build this talk as new research on out-of-body experience. I'll tell you a little bit about the most complicated research I'd like to do, which I don't have the facilities to do at this time. I've done experiments with psychokinesis where the person changed the temperature across the room. Now, I've done experiments where someone said that they went to another location and I took brain waves and other heart rate, respiration, and different physiological readings. My major finding to this point was that there is a loss of electrical energy in the occipital lobes of the brain where vision takes place. This was a perception type of experiment. In this out-of-body, they were perceiving something, not acting on something as you would in PK. So there was a loss of electrical energy in the body. That's my major finding to date. And even though it was a small difference, it was a pattern that was easy to see. And I counted off a lot of physiological data, more than would even be necessary, because I really wanted to make sure that that finding was correct. So I used even more data than I had to. In the temperature changing experiments, an effect is created at a distance, maybe 25 feet, maybe in another room. Usually it's in the same room. We did a lot of these at City College. And the important thing to do is when you're working with someone who has an ability is to listen to them. So, for instance, Ingo Swan was the one who was changing the temperature at City College with Dr. Gertrude Schmeidler. And he said that he used PK by exteriorizing, that is, going out of the body. Then Gertrude placed the thermistor, which was how you were going to detect if there was a change in temperature on the other side of the room. She placed the thermistor where he said he went. And when she did that, when she went along with what he said and tried to design the experiment around his abilities, he had a high positive correlation with the target, and he changed the temperature as much as 1 degree at a distance of 25 feet. He said he sent out a mental probe, and so that's one point to consider. They've done a lot of experiments along these lines. For instance, changing magnetic fields. I think they've even been able to bend some laser beams. That wasn't formally written up. I just heard of that. Then Dean John out at Princeton University set up thermistors, and he used another person whom he calls a PK operator, and he was able to obtain significant results too with the temperature changing. Dr. Osis at the American Society for Psychic Research had a different idea. He was still interested in perception, and when I worked with him, I worked on perception and physiology. So he had an optical device which could display a target, but the target did not appear in one place at one time to rule out clairvoyance. It operated on a split beam principle so that you had half of the target in one place and the rest of the target was bounced off into space, so that you had to be in exact alignment with that to say that that symbol is on that quadrant and it's that color. And the odds were very high on each trial, like 1 out of 80. So that if you could identify the symbol and the color and the quadrant, it was pretty sure that you were seeing something. If you could do this consistently, of course. So Dr. Osis said, well, here's a better idea. What if I put a shielded cabinet in front of that window where they have to look and see if there's any interaction with the space there? Now, the sensitive at this time, usually this was Alex Tannis who did this from Maine. He would be about 100 feet away in a soundproof room, hooked up brain waves and all that. He could respond over a one-way intercom system. And so then they would tell him the target is ready. They would signal him the target is ready. He would then try to project his consciousness 100 feet into the front of the building, 6 doorways. Not that he's going through the doorways, but just to give you an idea of the wall space. And sure enough, what they found was that when he could identify the target, that there was some interaction. And Dr. Osis has done some of the best work on out of body. I admire him a lot. He's a real pioneer. He'll get out there and he'll really go out on the edge, and he'll try to get the data. He's a good researcher in those terms. He doesn't just sit back and try to statisticize everything. He'll really get out there and try to get it. He thinks that the results, these are reported in the Journal for the American Society for Psychic Research, that they are interpreted as conforming the idea that there is something that gets out there and perceives, makes decisions, has memory, and can also interact with space. He said that his findings suggest that consciousness, or a major part of the human personality, is externalized and exists apart from the physical body. And it was in that manner that those results were obtained. That's what Dr. Otis says in his article. One time there was an energy group in New York City, and they had a photomultiplier which senses light. And I mean very, very small, amounts of light, like photons. And they had this light-tight room, and what they were looking at were bioenergetic fields. John Parakis and some of those people were going there, and they were doing their meditation or whatever it is they do, and then they were studying the light around their body with this photomultiplier that they had to work with it and refine it and refine it and refine it to get it to be, to get the result for them, because the light was not a lot of light, but they could pick it up. So we said, hey, why don't we bring Alex Tanis over there, and we'll put him back in the back of the loft. I think it was about a 1,700-foot loft. And then we'll put a target in the light-tight room, and then we'll see if Alex can tell us what the target is and if he interferes with the photomultiplier or if it senses any light. And sure enough, that worked also. And soon the energy group disbanded, or I don't know what happened to them. But it was almost like when you really get something, just blows people away and they're not heard from again. I've seen this happen time and time again. You have to realize when you're going after this phenomenon that it is frightening, and you have to know that, otherwise you're going to get blown away. You have to be prepared and understand, that's the way it is. I mean, when you see something that defies everything that you've learned from the beginning, you got to be ready for that. They did experiments in Atlanta, Georgia with cloud chambers. They had people from Baltimore, New York City, affecting cloud chambers in Georgia, making the little traces go across the cloud chambers, that kind of thing. They did some research down in North Carolina with the woman named Felicia Perez. She did PK, and she could move a compass needle. That's a pretty good movement when we're talking about changing molecular activity. But she could actually affect a compass needle, so that's getting on another scale altogether. They put film, like a packet of film, here and here and here and underneath the target over there, because they wanted to see if she affects that compass needle over there, will she affect the pathway to it, or what will happen? What happened was the film underneath the target was not exposed. Now, let me get this absolutely right. The film underneath the compass was totally exposed. That's what I thought. And the other 3 packets of film were partially exposed, and the amount of exposure decreasing in proportion to the distance. So it was exposed more underneath the target and more here, and a little less as it got closer to her. So the effect was weaker and it became stronger when it got over there. Okay, so now I'm setting this up for you to tell you what my next research idea is and how I came to the conclusion that this is what needs to be done next. If you've got an effect over there, and you've got an effect within the body, a loss of energy over here, and totally exposed film over there, what is the next logical step? You want to see what's happening between here and there. And I think that this is a perfectly logical experiment. However, I can't seem to get anyone to share any facilities with me so that I can pursue this. And it's a little frustrating, but I'm a fairly patient woman. Excuse me. I would like to have a room where you can measure square feet electromagnetically, so you can actually see how the energy moves, or if any energy moves, or does it go like this, or does it go like this, or what how does the energy move. But the implications of this research would be, I mean, if for instance the finding was that this went straight across over there and did that, whatever was the assigned task, the implications of the research, it seems that people don't want that coming out of their laboratory, because it says that we can move independently of our body and affect things, and no one's anxious to get that out into the mass media, out of their laboratory at any rate, if they're worried about funding. I understand the problem. But that is my main research idea that I'd like to do. And since I need $500,000 worth of equipment, I don't see this happening next week. I'd like to work with movement, behavior, development of movement, those kinds of professionals who work with the way we learn how to move our body. I'd like to study it from a point of view as a psychokinetic effect. This would be a long-term type of research, but I don't know. I think that would be a worthwhile way to go, to study how we learn how to move. Because we take it for granted that we woke up one day and could move, but we had to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice to get any coordination going. In terms of OBE perception, it seems that the two people that I worked with who were most consistent in identifying targets at a distance out of sight said that the perception had to do with wavelength or frequency. As if the operator, whatever that is, we will say like our non-physical beingness would be the operator, moves at a certain frequency. The physical universe moves at a certain frequency. Now, as long as I use this filtering device, my body, I can focus in and see clearly everything in this room. But if I try to extend that perception and not use this device, but just see straight on, it's possible that I've got to change the wavelength or the frequency of that beingness to coincide with the physical reality. And that, from my own personal experience, I did notice that there was, I have experienced a frequency problem when I'm trying to see. A lot of people, when we had fly-in experiments in New York, and we would have people from all over the country come to the laboratory at a certain moment, and there would be a target laid out there, and they would try to identify it. But several times they saw a crystal over on Dr. Oza's desk instead of concentrating on the target area. And I got to thinking, what is it about crystals, and why do they see crystals? Out-of-body vision reports include distorted, fisheye lens, prismatic effects, more so than just a sharp, clear form. And as far as I've been able to ascertain, none of the people I worked with could identify numbers or letters with any accuracy. They could tell you that it had a line like that and a line like that and then sort of a half a circle, but they couldn't tell you it was a 5. You see what I mean? So it almost looked like it was more of a right hemisphere function of vision. If I had a glass on the target, they might say that, they would not see that at all, because like the light would bounce off of it, and then the light rays themselves might obscure the vision of that. Sometimes in other cases, light rays, I had to keep changing the lighting to get it just right so that the perception would work. this is in a particular case where a person has a controlled ability, has already worked with it for years, and has only come to me now to train up the ability even further. So I'm trying to help every way I can. If you can't see this, let's try this. If you can't do that, let's do this. You know, I mean, we were just trying to find out what it was about. They could see, like if I did a clay, maybe a clay, like a chair or whatever I wanted to make a clay form, they could see that pretty good because it was like that absorbed the light. So there's some kind of real vision going on here, I believe, because of all the characteristics that we were able to tell. And so another idea I have, if I have to take my show on the road, is to maybe just develop some boxes of different sizes and different colors and have targets which will be in an envelope and will slide in there so that I can slide the envelope off without looking at the target. I'm not going to be able to preclude precognition in this experiment, but I might be able to get away from telepathy. I can't get away from clairvoyance with this, but I mean, if I don't have anything to work with, it's very hard for me to get too sophisticated. I would put just probably geometrical forms in the beginning. I might just put one color or two colors, but what I would try to do is vary everything. The lighting, whether I might have the box open so that you could look in, or I might have the box covered and only have a little hole in the top, so you have to condense your vision, because some people told me that the smaller the aperture was, the clearer they could see. If they could really condense that point of vision, they could see better. So I might try something like that, and then I could just take these boxes and I could go to the person's home and they could be comfortable, and I could do an experiment with them right there in their own space, which is another idea that I might pursue. I'm not sure. I met Jim Lynn here tonight, and he's interested in near-death experience, and I had just said on the way coming over from Arizona, now I wonder if I should talk about near-death experience. I never did anything, I never did any research with it, but certainly it pertains to out-of-body experience. So I said, sure, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Some of the common elements which crop up in most of the reports of dying are a ringing in the ears, moving along a dark tunnel, finding oneself outside the physical body with perception in the immediate area, usually viewing a resuscitation attempt or a drowning or whatever is going on at that moment. The patient calms down after a while. Just a minute. It's kind of warm in here, isn't it? I hope it wasn't just me. Okay. The patient calms down after a while and notices his new body has different perceptions and abilities than the physical body. Spirits of the deceased are often present to help, and sometimes a being of light, as they describe it, appears. Telepathic communication occurs, and sometimes an instantaneous playback of the major events of the individual's life. Intense feelings of joy, love, and peace make the person want to remain, but somehow a reunion with the physical body takes place and life continues. The experience is somewhat ineffable, they can't really describe it, and most often misunderstood. So the person often suppresses it, or at least will not talk about it, despite the profound effect it has on their view of life and death from that day forward. And Jim was telling me that he had an experience of this nature, and it certainly had a profound effect on his life. The most common feeling reported in the first few moments following death, this is clinical death, where the patient is resuscitated, are a desperate desire to get back into the body, and an intense regret over one's demise. However, once the dying person reaches a certain depth of experience, they don't want to come back and may even resist returning to their body. In only one of the cases that Raymond Moody studied and wrote about in Life After Life did a physician reveal any familiarity at all with near-death experience or express any sympathy with them. Now, since then, we have cardiologist Mike Sabine, doing work, and that's good. That's good that he's doing that because he has access to a population and everything he needs to do it. Several doctors told him that they were utterly baffled about how patients with no medical knowledge could describe in such detail the procedures used in resuscitation attempts when they knew the patients were dead. Death in these cases was defined as the absence of clinically detectable vital signs. Moody says that MDs are very carefully trained to pay close attention to objective signs of disease processes, but to take subjective reports with a grain of salt. And if you've ever been to a doctor, I think you can understand that clearly. So doctors may hear these reports, but pay no attention to them. There are some similarities between a near-death experience and those encountered in the use of drugs, brain damage, in psychopathological states, and in dreams, hallucinations, and delusions. However, the phenomenon most closely resembling the stages of the experience of dying have been studied and produced under laboratory conditions in isolation research. If you know about where they put them in deprivation, they put them in rooms or isolation tanks. That kind of phenomenon closely resembles near-death experience.
Take your jacket off.
I don't think I want to do that.
It's easier.
Thank you anyway. One of the major feelings expressed by those who came back to life was the overwhelming feeling of loneliness in the experience. At Menninger Foundation, they are doing some nice research, or they have done it. I don't know if they're completed with it yet, but it's Gabbard and Trimlow, and they are taking out-of-body experience information from questionnaires. They're taking near-death experience information from questionnaires, and they're trying to correlate those in a computer. How do these two experiences match up? And they have found significant differences between the two experiences. A person undergoing a near-death experience is more likely to hear noises during the early stage of the experience. They're more likely to feel like they're traveling through a tunnel, those in a near-death experience. They're more likely to see their physical body from a distance. They're more apt to sense that there are other beings in non-physical form around them. And these are particularly deceased people with whom they had a close emotional bond. Encounters with a brilliant light are more often described in a near-death experience than an out-of-body experience. You don't hear that too much. In the after effects of the two experiences, the person is more likely to feel that there's a purpose connected to the near-death experience. Why was their life saved? So they have more of a sense of purpose after they come back. That the experience is of a lasting benefit. I mean, it makes a profound effect on them, and it doesn't go away. It transforms their personality in some way. And a lot more people in a near-death experience have a spiritual or religious experience of some kind. And then, of course, that the person's life is changed by the experience. Is more apt to happen in a near-death experience. I have a sort of a new idea, which is just forming in my mind. I'm going to try it out on you here tonight. I don't know whether that I've gone completely off the wall with this or not, but I'll try it out and we'll see what we think. You know, when they talk about people having psychological problems, you know, you'll see they're flipped out, she's beside herself, or freaked out, or out of her head, or out of his mind, or, you know the terms. If we could listen to our language, we might be able to find out what's wrong with us so that we can fix it. Now, all of those terms there indicate that when someone is mentally disturbed or confused, that they're not at themselves, you see. And by the same token, if I was this body and I had a headache, I would say, I hurt up here. I hardly ever hear anybody say that. They always say, my head hurts, or this is my hand. We don't describe this as ourselves. We describe this as something we own, our most valuable possession, of course. Okay, so I think it's important for us to listen to our language to find out more about who we are and how we're in relation to everything else. If someone can get out of their body, the next question is, can someone get in my body? So, in my book, I did deal with it only lightly and very carefully, anthropologically and sociologically. But the idea of spirit possession interfering with mortals is not addressed by the psychological community today. Before the advent of psychoanalysis, every disease that could not be explained by the male practitioners was considered a case of possession by demons. Before psychology was called psychology, it was called demonology. Now, as psychology sought to become an established science, the idea of demonology was thrown out. No more demons, but along with it, any idea of possession as a cause for any illness, addiction, or confusion was also thrown out. With the current issue of walk-ins and takeovers, it would seem that this idea of possession has to be reconsidered. I'm living over there in Jerome, Arizona, and there was a man who lived there named Bill Finch, and he wrote a book called The Pendulum and Possession, and he wrote that in 1971. He thought that he had found a way to detect possession or interference with a personality, and also a method of exorcising the intruding spirit or energy. He sticks very much to the word energy. He did not feel that all possessing entities were earthbound spirits or demons, but could just be energy masses which are retained after the physical body is destroyed. Now, we've all experienced static electricity around us. If we, like if we walk across a rug sometime and take a hold of a doorknob and get shocked, or pet an animal, so he thought maybe that this energy field, electrical energy field, that is around us might just, when the body is destroyed, that just might be there as an energy mass, and even that could interfere. I don't understand this idea 100% that he had. I'm only passing along to you that he thought it didn't have to have any personality or a demon or any earthbound spirit. He didn't think it needed any of that. It could just be pure energy interfering. Our bodies are electrochemical systems, and many electrical devices have been invented to so-called cure our ailments. I guess ECT, electroconvulsive shock therapy, is probably the extreme of this treatment theory. But now I ask you to consider, how do they know what ECT does? Does ECT rearrange brain cells? or does it drive out possessing entities? You get a marked effect from ECT. What does it do? Do they actually know what they're doing? Well, anyway, Bill Finch speaks about these ideas, but his own method is called a bioenergy exorcism and uses only healthy human energy to remove this unwanted or possessing energy. So that he just touches the person probably between the shoulder blades in the back, and he can deal with it in that manner. You know, on my way out west here, I stopped in Arkansas to see Harold Sherman. He's been very good to me through the years. I don't know if you all know Harold Sherman. He wrote many books on psychic phenomenon, and he's written over 100 books in his life. I was amazed to see he had one whole bookshelf just of his books. It's great. And Harold's 86 years old. He's been doing this for 60 years, I guess. I mean, I respect him a lot for his thinking, and he said that this idea is important to consider and look at. And so I must tell you that I'm motivated to even try to think about it by Harold. And that's, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to think about it in any good way. I might just write a novel, you know. Maybe I can get enough money to do my research. But at any rate, I'm trying to look this idea, so be patient with me, please. 50 years before Bill Finch, Dr. Carl Wicklund, who was an MD, working in a hospital situation, mental patients and the whole thing, had used electrical techniques and documented his research in a book called 30 Years Among the Dead. It was published in 1924. It's back in paperback now. It's a classic, and there's some good stuff there in that book. Not all of it, of course, but it's documented case after case, and you can find out some things in that book. I recommend it. Wicklund, 30 Years Among the Dead. He was attempting back then, in 1924, to get other professionals, and especially MDs, since they were the ones working with the patients, to consider invisible reality. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote all the Sherlock Holmes books, said that he never met anyone with such a wide experience of invisibles as Dr. Wicklund. And he said that no one interested in obsession, he said obsession, and there is a fine line between obsession and possession that I haven't really delineated yet. Anyone interested in obsession or the curing of insanity by psychic means should not miss his book. Now, Finch had used a pendulum to predict or to detect another energy level in a person, and a charismatic exorcism, laying on the hands approach. Wicklund's wife was a trance medium, and so she greatly facilitated his work, because when Wicklund suspected possession, for instance, if the family said, I don't know, one day he was like a different person, or you know, if the behavior would just change drastically, just immediately like that, you know, this would make him zero in and try to look at it more closely. Those kind of major changes. When he suspected this, he used a static electricity device, which he doesn't describe fully in his book, unfortunately, but it seems to me it was probably some kind of a metal something that he put down over the body. But there's no pictures of it, and I couldn't figure out exactly what it would look like. He would run this static electricity device over the patient's body to drive the spirit out of that body and into the body of Mrs. Wicklund, who was in a trance. Then the spirit could communicate through Mrs. Wicklund and be helped to its evolutionary process. They didn't just say, okay, get out of this body, this is not your body. They said, you don't belong here, and they also try to cooperate with people on another plane. This was an occult circle group in 1924, and they had others who, if you have people who do rescue work with earthbound spirits here, then it's possible that there are invisible entities who try to help the transition as well as possible. The patients invariably showed signs of improvement in Wickland's cases. A patient's personality would sometimes be transformed to a remarkable extent, resulting in a much happier and healthier life. Addictions, illnesses, he talked especially about invalidism, of being an invalid, how that kind of paralysis might be maintained by a spirit that doesn't know that it doesn't have a body. He got results in all of these different kinds of cases, from mental confusion to paralyses. When I talk to sensitives in the psychic community across the country, I hear of rescue work with earthbound spirits, I hear about walk-ins, I hear about takeovers, but I'm mystified. When I go around parapsychologists, there's no mention of any of these issues within the parapsychological community. Now, I can understand the psychologists throwing it out so that they could get established, you know, but parapsychologists, I mean, this parapsychology is still in a very infant stage as a science. And I'd like to understand, you know, that the parapsychologists are probably as frightened of being associated with ideas of possession, I'm shaking right here myself even talking about it, as were those early psychologists and their successors today. However, parapsychologists have the right, if not the responsibility, to look at these issues and possibly shed some light on this whole area that the public is talking about. I think that parapsychologists could do a real service if we could investigate human experiences and see, you know, what might be going on there, because psychologists are going to ask you a few questions, they're going to put a label on it, and they're going to pigeonhole you, and that's the end of that. The parapsychologists have the responsibility to look at the human experience and not just try to name it. I mean, I wonder how many alcoholics and drug addicts are victims of earthbound spirits continuing their earth habits through unsuspecting humans. I mean, I wonder how many paralyses and other illnesses might be caused by invisible entities still experiencing their physical problems through other bodies because they haven't yet realized that they lost their own body. How many people are institutionalized and diagnosed with nebulous names like schizophrenia, manic depression, and so forth, when in fact they may have lost control of their body for various reasons, and other invisibles are expressing ideas and behaviors through these unfortunate bodies. When will we learn to seriously study and investigate human experience, no matter how bizarre it might appear, instead of just labeling it? We need to know more about our human experiences in order to move forward in our spiritual evolution. Our present self-image as bodies is limiting and causes dissension among us. With more thorough investigation of human experience, we may be able to arrive at a more correct self-image. A body seems not to be in unity with all life by reason of its apparent material structure and boundaries. However, a unitive experience may emerge from a consideration that bodies are moving masses of atoms spinning at certain frequencies in a fluidic, universal, energy field. Mystics have repeatedly affirmed that we are not bodies, but that we possess bodies. There is great freedom and liberation in knowing this. So I thank you very much, and that's it.
I think Dr. Mitchell could have a few dozen likely and very willing subjects here if you'd like to start some experience tonight. Dr. Mitchell has offered to answer questions for a while, so why don't we go on to that if you'd like to do that.
Mitchell was aware that in the past 4 years, 2 different confirmatory studies have established that multiple personality cases, when the separate personalities are manifesting themselves, demonstrate distinct evoked potential responses and responses to specific stimulus. When they measure the brain waves and the general brain metabolism of the individual personality, they exhibit distinct personality and electrophysiological profiles.
Great, I'm glad you told me, and I'd like to get those references. See, because this is my, I'm just getting this together in my head this summer, you know. So I would like to have those references. Thank you. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I have a few things. You're interrupting when I go to thought. On the Eagle Swan experiment, what if he were just picking up an area of hyperkinetic energy, increased energy, and then he said put the thermometer there, and that he was naturally drawn in his out-of-body experience to a spot that had increased thermal energy or kinetic energy that would translate into physical to that. Is that not again, especially in view of your theory of possible energy masses?
This could be that's what he was doing. But I was thinking more in terms of listen to what the psychic says and try to design your experiment around their ability. But it could have been like, I guess it would be like clairvoyance.
That's a very telling statement of designing it around their ability. Why then do you not take that holistic view? Why are you trying to declare telepathy or clairvoyance a contamination to PK? What would happen if you view this psychic phenomenon as an inseparable, holistic type of thing, in which a person is synthesizing a perception and an ability to meet a situation? So wouldn't you get further in your research that way?
Yes, that's why that I've tried to talk about out-of-body experiences as a more holistic idea of how all these things are done. But of course, parapsychologists, and remember, I was in a laboratory being paid, and I needed the money badly, have to answer to the critics. I'm glad now that I'm not being paid by the field in a way, because I can think about anything I want to right now and investigate anything I want to. I want a more holistic approach. This is only terminology, you know, and maybe the terminology is wrong. Yes, I agree with you that we need a more holistic approach, and that's why I try to stick with out-of-body experience. But if I didn't mention PK in my research proposal, for instance, if I said I want to find out how somebody goes out of their body and across the room and affects something, which is a more holistic idea, well, I wouldn't get anyway. You know, I have to ascertain the, you know.
And the last two things, you mentioned your experiment. If you had the 500,000, what would you do? And what are your own abilities or gifts or experiences? You haven't spoken from a subjective viewpoint quite as yet, other than your trepidation at things like possession.
Trepidation?
Well,
I'm looking at it.
your own experience out of body and your own abilities in this area, if you were being candid.
Oh, trepidation at going out of my body. Oh, okay. That's all right.
The only thing that you did mention from a subjective level was your feeling about possession. Other than that, what has been your experiences? What are your own gifts or out-of-body experiences?
Yeah, I generally don't discuss my private life when I'm on the podium. I do feel that I have abilities. I am able to do remarkable things in my life that it's really hard, even after it's accomplished, how that I was able to do that. I do believe that what you can conceive and get a clear picture of, you can move toward it or bring it to you, however that works. We don't know sender, receiver. We don't know any of that information. I had an out-of-body experience, and the vision was not perfect, so of course I wasn't satisfied, so I sort of discarded. At one point I tried to make it practical. I tried to get information. I got very good information. It wasn't perfect, so that's great. I invalidate my own experience, and I suppose that I am afraid to know that I can even operate independently of my body, although I have had experiences, but it's just, I want it to be perfect, or else I'm not going to, play like I did it. Very critical. Yes?
Does the alteration in vision persist in the return to the body?
Does the what?
Does the alteration in vision persist in the return to the body?
Sometimes there's a little disorientation when the experiment is over for the person, and especially if you require them to be out for a long period of time, say a half an hour. I've seen in a laboratory, Dr. Osis would have detectives coming in with a stranger-to-stranger murder, which they have no way of solving stranger-to-stranger murders, and they would have the Altanis, as a matter of fact, and have him looking at a crime scene, and asking him questions for a half an hour, and I've seen him very debilitated from that. But Ingo was different. Whenever Ingo started getting the least bit exhausted or going into what he called effort, he would say, I got to rest now. He took better care of himself than Al did, considering we have no idea what we're asking these people to do. There is some disorientation sometimes, depending on the length. Sometimes Ingo will go in, see the target, draw it, get up, and let's go to lunch. Yeah?
You mentioned that the reduction in electrical activity in the body was one of the hallmark characteristics of an out-of-the-body experience in your research. Are you familiar with any comparisons between that reduction in electrical activity in out-of-the-body experience and in lucid dreams? Are you aware of any characteristic brainwave state in the out-of-the-body experience, delta, theta, alpha, or beta? And were you aware that Pat Price, former police commissioner of Burbank, just considered in an active study, was able to read perfectly well out of body?
No, I didn't know that Pat did that. I never met him, and I didn't know that. I've read, look, Charlie Tarts and Miss Z got all 5 numbers. I said, myself personally in the laboratory, I never saw anybody who could read a number or a letter. There are, and I have it in my book here, I may not remember all of them, but the amplitude falls off more on the right side than the left in the occipital lobe where the vision takes place. Joe Whitten in Canada did an experiment with Alex Tanis up there, and he got a ramp effect, almost like a DC potential shift type of thing, and then teeny tiny little beta, theta, which is a sort of a smaller, shorter, smoother wave, and sometimes beta riding on top of it. Low voltage mixed is what they call it. Okay. Charlie Tart, flattening of the EEG with Miss Z. When they had Swami Rama at Menninger, I think they asked him to control his body, stop his heart, for instance. You got the same kind of fall off in that condition. And I don't know how he stopped his heart. Did he sort of step out? I don't know that. They got less percent time alpha, which means to me the flattening of the record, with Blue Harari down in North Carolina, Bob Morris. And, I think there's some correlations there. I can't get anyone very much to see it, but I think it's there. And I'm still going to keep saying it's there, and I could be wrong.
I think we ought to give Dr. Mitchell a rest, and maybe a chance for everybody to cool off just a little bit if you'd like to wander around just a little bit. But let's do that. Then those who like to stay, let's get it back.